Hello, Paul.
I turned off the TV.
Sorry,
It's okay.
This is the fourth and the last of our summer series of presentations. We began on July 6th with a presentation by George Weaver on the significant life, overcoming your fear of being unnoticed and forgotten, based on his book, same title. Then we followed up the following week with Paul Atkinson's presentation on the Colson Fellowship Program, Developing a Comprehensive Christian Worldview. And last week, Donna Weeks provided her testimony in her presentation on my spiritual pilgrimage from the New Age to new life in Christ. This evening, of course, as you know, we're privileged to have with us Rhonda Thomas. Rhonda is the president of Truth in Education, and she'll be speaking on new threats to American education, what every Christian should know. Now, I did want to mention that our Areopagus Fall Seminar begins in mid-August, and this year our seminar will be on the topic, How Should We Now Live? A seminar in cultural apologetics. And we will devote virtually the entire seminar this fall to the life and legacy of Francis Schaeffer. Many of you have received preliminary announcements related to that seminar. Let me just say a few words about it before I introduce Rhonda this evening. How Should We Now Live? Part one is a seminar in cultural apologetics that provides a biblically based analysis of the current state of American culture and how Christians can live faithfully and responsibly in the midst of a post-Christian society that's becoming increasingly hostile toward Christian values and beliefs. In this context, this course will focus primarily on the life and legacy of Francis Schaeffer, who, along with C.S. Lewis, was one of the most perceptive and influential Christian thinkers of the 20th century. Ours is a society and culture that celebrates narcissism, hedonism, materialism. In the process, virtually every area of American life has become secularized, socialized, sexualized, and racialized under the influence of very sinister forces that are waging very aggressive and unrelenting attacks on morality in general and Christianity in particular. Now, as our spiritual, moral, and ethical foundations collapse, so goes our religious and cultural institutions, our economy, our political system, and any remaining standards of civility. Now, as Bob Dylan sang in the 1960s, the times they are a-changing. Well, the times certainly have changed, but certainly not for the better. And back then, nobody could have possibly foreseen the tectonic shift that's radically altered American society and culture over the past 50 years, or just how far our nation has strayed from its religious and cultural origins and heritage during the last 60 or 70 years. We live in a society that increasingly calls evil good and good evil. Now, in this course, How Shall We Now Live? It's an interactive study centered around directed readings and focused discussions on two seminal issues. Number one, the challenges of living in an increasingly dysfunctional and degenerate post-Christian society and culture. And secondly, the opportunities that our current cultural situation affords in terms of practicing a faithful and holistic vision of discipleship. So join us on Wednesday evenings, if your schedule allows, for this very unique, very informative, very stimulating study of the life and legacy of Francis Schaeffer and what it means to understand and practice holistic Christian discipleship in the midst of our current cultural disintegration. Never in American history have the internal forces aligned against us been so formidable as they are now. And never before have American Christians needed to be better informed and better engaged in the battle for all that is true and good and beautiful for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So as I said, that course will begin on Wednesday evenings in mid-August, and you should be receiving regular updates so that you can go ahead and register for the course and join us. It'll be a very, very in-depth, substantive course, and I think you'll value greatly from what we study in that course. Well, this evening, we're again privileged to have with us Rhonda Thomas. And Rhonda is the founder and president of Atlanta-based Truth in Education. Now, that is a parent-led grassroots organization that advocates for the fundamental right of parents to make moral, academic, and medical decisions for their children. And that's local control of educating children starts and ends in the home. Now, Rhonda's been married to her husband, Richard, for 39 years. They have 2 children, and over the years, she's been involved in ministries that support families. She's worked with several nonprofits through fundraising and membership as well. She's been very politically involved over the past 20 years in the legislative process here in the state of Georgia. She does wonderful work, and again, it's a real privilege to have Rhonda with us this evening. So, Rhonda, welcome, and we're very much looking forward to your presentation. And Rhonda, can you hear me? Rhonda, you are muted.
Okay, I didn't know when to unmute.
Okay.
I kept sending a text to Millie, but she didn't get it. She's being good and doesn't have her phone. How are
All
you?
right, very good. Well, good to have you with us.
Thank you. Are you ready for me to start?
Yes, we can go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be with you all tonight to talk really about kind of what's taking place in our public, but not just public, but our private schools also, and not just private, but also private Christian schools. So Truth in Education is very involved in what's taking place at the Capitol, the parental rights bill, the divisive concepts bill, the obscenity bill. We were involved in a lot of that was taking place. We love to meet with parents and speak and present like we're doing tonight to educate you on the different ideologies in the school. And we really love to come alongside and encourage parents as they're walking this journey with their children and the concerns that they have within the school system. What I want to start out with tonight, and I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but social emotional learning. And what we're finding out more and more about social emotional learning, and I'm going to refer to that as SEL throughout this. So just so you know, I'm speaking of social emotional learning, but social emotional learning is we believe psychological warfare on our children. It actually rewires their brain. It's neuroplasticity. And so we ran across a video that was done by Dr. James Giordano, and he is heavily involved in DARPA and research and brain research. He was speaking to West Point. And as he was speaking to them, he was telling them that the brain is actually going to be the weapon of mass destruction in the future. And so our country, as well as all other countries, are doing research on the brain. And he told them basically that what makes you think and what makes you feel, that if he can understand all of that, he in fact can understand how to manipulate your brain. So he encouraged them to remember the 3 A's: the ability to access the brain, the ability to assess the brain, and the ability to affect the brain of individuals. And that is what we feel like is taking place in our schools today on a different level. And that's with our students through social emotional learning. It really puts a lot of, as he said, do you understand the power? It puts the brain at your fingertips. So the main organization and the first organization really that was established for SEL is CASTLE, Collaborative to Advance Social and Emotional Learning. So in 1994, the Fetzer Institute actually held their first conference. At that time, it was really geared toward violence and drug use in schools and healthy choices, but it's advanced since then. Actually, the founder of this, one of the co-founders of CASTLE was a Rockefeller granddaughter. So we know where the roots of that goes to. That's a very, very powerful family that is tied to the UN. So the gentleman that actually founded CASTLE, his mentor that he really looked up to was the Fetzer Institute. Well, Mr. Fetzer's mentor was Alice Bailey. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alice Bailey, but Alice Bailey was founder of the Luciferian Publishing Company. So SEL actually has occult roots. There are many, many, many SEL curriculum platforms. They're all online. Second Step, 7 Mindsets, Edgenuity, Conscious Discipline, they just go on and on. So if one falls off, another falls on. But there's hundreds of companies, and it's really just an online curriculum. But it's not just that, it's a framework. Every SEL organization has to align with CASTLE's framework. I met a gentleman in Houston, and he has sent, it's called Hope Rising, an SEL curriculum to us to review, and he promises that it's different. But I did ask him, does this have to align with CASTLE? And he said, yes, there are a lot of schools that will not accept their program unless it aligns with CASTLE's framework. So SEL is presented as something great for the kids, and it could be used in this fashion, but unfortunately it is not being. For the teacher to understand the student, to know how to work with them, to know how to who to connect them with if they need additional help. But actually what it is it's moving away from core curriculum into cultural competencies. And some examples of those is private property. They talk about private property and how it's bad. Black Lives Matter, comprehensive sex ed, diversity, equity, and inclusion, critical race theory, pansexuality, climate change, guys. The new Green Deal is actually part of what's being taught in our schools. So as we know, it's a progressive ideology that's being taught to our children, and at the same time, they're collecting data. So an example of this, it's woven throughout their day in every subject. A history teacher might give a lesson on white oppression, and the next class might be a math class, and the math teacher asks a question about how math is not equitable. So you really can't opt out of any of this. The entire progressive ideas are woven throughout every subject, throughout every day. So basically, we feel like SEL is a re-education camp. It is meant and used to change the students' language, their thoughts, their behaviors, and their personal relationships, all to things that would not align with what most parents would want, and especially a Christian family or anyone with a faith. So I don't know if you're familiar with the 45 communist goals, but this is actually part of our congressional record that happened in 1963. So what we're doing, excuse me, I got that out of line there. Okay, so what we're doing, and I'll go back. What we're doing with SEL is we are taking progressive ideas and we are using SEL to normalize those. We actually do that by shocking our children with information they cannot understand, what they cannot process, they cannot perceive, and it's totally against their values. And even a young child knows when something is right or wrong. We have a psychologist on our board, and this is how he explains it. Your child leaves your home every day feeling safe and loved. They enter the school system. and they're on an unlevel playing field. They are actually destabilizing their emotions through SEL. And by doing that, they're able then to bring in all these ideologies. He believes, from working with adolescents, that we keep them at a heightened state of anxiety every day, and they can only maintain that for so long. So he said that in the past, he would see adolescents in his office that self-mutilated maybe every 3 to 4 months. It is every week now. And he said they are seeing disorders in children they have never seen. An example would be PTSD. So he actually he joined our board, and he's speaking out because he believes that SEL is very dangerous. So back to the communist goals. Number 24 is eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Number 25 is break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. 26, present homosexuality and degeneracy and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. So some of you may not know that 43 states, K through 12 libraries are actually exempt from the obscenity law. That all started with Alfred Kinsey. His research, he was actually a pedophile, and the individuals he used for his research were pedophiles, but he actually got all of his fake research into our legislation, and over the years it has relaxed all the laws, including the penal code. And that's how this came in. So this is why it's very difficult. Every year there's an obscenity bill. All we want is for K through 12 libraries to be taken out of that exemption, but it never happens. So this is another way that we are bringing shock value into our schools and into our schools, libraries. So here's another example. This was actually put up as an ad looking for students in all these counties that can be taught about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then go back to their schools and promote it. The books on the right actually came from the Georgia School Counseling Association. These are books that our counselors use. Now, again, you may not find these in every school, but if you consider the fact that all our school counselors are educated through Georgia School Counseling Association, then you know this has to be coming through in some form or fashion. And if you notice, it's all about police violence. This is a book that is for 10 to 14-year-olds. It's a hardback. You can also find it in PDF and in Audible if you're able to get through the filter, which many children are on their Chromebook, into something called EBSCO. But this is actually in some of our libraries. This is 10 to 14-year-olds. You really can't even, they would not let someone take this into a prison. And so yet our children have it. We can't get this out because of the obscenity law. So books can be put up for review. We just passed a new bill, SB 226, but it really doesn't do anything. It allows parents a way to get books reviewed, but actually in the end, it's very weak and it didn't change anything. So we'll continue to have the obscenity in our schools. It won't be going away. In reality, if you removed all the LGBTQ books and all the pornography books, all you have left is propaganda. There is nothing there hardly that is worth reading. And as if we know, ideas start in books. So this is very dangerous for our children. So if you go through, this is something else that our children are learning. There are gay clubs in our schools. Those clubs are not there for those gay children. They're there to recruit other children. Utah is our most conservative state, and gender dysphoria is up 10,000%. And it's mostly girls, and another group that they are recruiting is autistic children. So we are normalizing these lifestyles with our children. When your child is in this classroom, and it's rare to have a classroom that doesn't have 1 or 2 children that are confused about their sex, and then as they get older, are beginning to use pronouns. And the counselors don't have to tell you they're using pronouns, but that again, they're seeing this, they're hearing about it, and it's normalizing it to our children. And then a child may start on puberty blocking drugs and hormones. And when they do that, again, it's normalizing it because all the children are watching them go through this transition. So comprehensive sex ed is another thing that's in our schools. It actually teaches children that they're sexual at birth, and that is what Alfred Kinsey believed, and that's what the United Nations believes. It tells them at 9 years old, it shows them how to use a condom. It's actually grooming our children for pedophilia and for sex trafficking. They teach them to say things like, I like it when you touch me there. So they're desensitizing our children to sex. And they're also, through this, breaking down the family and destroying marriage. This is another example of shock value. I have a team in Bryan County, and we were fighting this, a 12th grade English literature class. The children had to solve the problem of world hunger, which, as we know, is a UN agenda. They had to get with their group, and they had to come up with a business model for the raising and eating of human babies to solve world hunger, mass production, distribution, and a target market. So what they came up with is when you first get pregnant, you unfortunately are not going to be able to keep that baby. So don't be worried about it. We'll take care of your child. We'll give it a vaccine and keep it safe. It probably won't wake up. So we'll give it a funeral, but that funeral will not be in a cemetery because, again, we're protecting the environment. So what we'll do is we'll make hamburgers and we'll feast off of it. And it tastes just like the real thing. So here is their mass production. So basically, America would get in touch with the Chinese government because they're overpopulated. So they would get children from there. They would also work with organizations like foster care. The meat is cured and dried, similar to that of beef jerky, so that it doesn't spoil and is preserved. And their business is called Dahmer's Mini Camp. You are what you eat. And this is targeting low income and poverty areas and countries. And I know you're all familiar with Dahmer. This is a graphic novel that our children can get their hands on, and it's My Friend Dahmer. So another thing that we're doing in our schools is we're actually collecting data on our children through surveys. These surveys, every parent can opt out of, but they don't know it. But they are collecting information not on just your children, but all the family members. And this is taking place at different times during the day. And so this is actually, we believe, leading to a social credit score for our children. This is an example of some of the questions. Do you get along with your family members? Are you concerned about drug and alcohol use? Are your parents divorced or separated? Do your parents live with you? Are any of your family members in jail? They ask questions like, how many times a week have you bathed? How many times a week do you have sex? Is there a gun in your home? Have you ever used meth? It just asks all these questions, which in reality plants seeds. Think about asking a child, how many times a week do you have sex? The first thing they're probably going to think is, all my friends must be having sex. I need to do this. And every question that is asked is negative, nothing positive. This is another thing that they're affected with, and this is kindergarten, comprehensive sex ed. This teaches the child that it doesn't matter how you're born, it's what you think, how you feel, and how you express yourself. It has nothing to do with biological sex. Transgender bathrooms. This is another thing that is hitting our kids. I talk to parents every day, and even if there's not a policy in the school or on the board, I have parents telling us that boys are going into girls' bathroom, the children are complaining, and the administration's doing nothing. So this is happening in our schools, even if there is not a policy promoting it or condemning it. So it is happening. This is a video that was found within Edgenuity, which is an online platform, and their SEL program is Purpose Prep. You hear our administrators tell us that there is no CRT in our schools, critical race theory. I hope you can hear this. I'm going to play it.
Reverse racism is a little complicated, but the simple answer is no, it is not real. Although all of us have the ability to be prejudiced and discriminate against others, not all of us can turn that prejudice into laws, policies, and social practices. In the United States, white people have historically controlled our systems and institutions and race relations. Think of it this way. Are there any laws or policies that have been created and passed by non-white people that discriminated against white people, either on purpose or on accident? No. So until white people have been systematically marginalized through slavery, racial terrorism, Jim Crow, and other attempts to stop them from voting and other practices, I cannot say reverse racism is real.
So this is a live video, and we have to remember that within all these online platforms, these live videos could be replaced at any time with any topic, and even the school would not realize what is taking place. This gentleman was speaking to elementary students. What elementary child is going to get this? But again, it's that repetitiveness of pushing these ideas into our children and destabilizing them. This is also Purpose Prep Edgenuity. This is a transgender teaching safe sex to middle schoolers. I'm going to play just a little bit of it. It's a little long, but.
Second, there are different contraceptives that help in practicing safe sex. The first one is birth control. Birth control is helpful in preventing pregnancy. That is all that birth control is helpful for doing.
So I'm not going to play all of that because it's a little bit long, but this is the worst person that should be teaching safe sex. They have the highest rate of STDs. I will tell you that as he goes on, he actually says, my father did not approve of my lifestyle. So, but you don't have to tell your parents. So it's always encouraging people not to tell their parents. So they're teaching our children to lie on top of everything else. This was 6-year-olds listening to Brain Pop video.
On May 22nd, he was an iconic leader of the gay rights movement in the 1970s. Today, he's honored as a pioneer in the fight to end discrimination against the entire LGBT community. It stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Some people prefer the broader term queer. That includes anyone who isn't heterosexual and all members of the LGBT community. Together, the community identifies as LGBTQ+. On May 26th.
That is 6-year-olds, guys. Our children are being introduced to things that are not normal, that are above their heads, and they do not have a clue what to do with it. So we are causing a lot of mental health issues in our schools. The data that's being collected is being collected for an emotional quotient. Not only have we, of course, we have an IQ score, we now have an EQ score, which is all SEL. Self-awareness, empathy. You're going to have empathy all the time. Even Biden talks about empathy. That is the word. Motivation, self-regulation, and social skills. This is all moving away from academics into therapeutic education. So this is from the Georgia School Board Association's, one of their webinars. We cannot always find examples in the school because everything is online. But if you look at all the professional development, you see it and you know where it's coming from. And if they're being taught this, you know it's in our schools. So the first row of books that's recommended to help teachers with their self-reflection on their racism. And then the second row is for educators and counselors to provide a framework for working with students. Post-traumatic slavery syndrome, white fragility, school counseling achievement. This is all based on critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You cannot really separate the three things, SEL, DEI, and CRT. They're all one thing. This is another slide from one of their presentations, understanding and recognizing white privilege and personally. Examine the impact of white privilege on your school community. I don't want to make this about white children because this is about all our children. In the end, all our children are going to suffer. This is about everyone being not equal, but equity, everyone. So it doesn't matter what color you are, they're all going to lose. Now that SEL Castle has come in, part of the Luciferian and the Fetzer Institute is about stealing the spirit, which is what we're seeing them do in our schools. So now that that's taken place, now it's time to instill spirituality in our students. So there's actually a conference in October that is geared toward that. They say at the core of every child, there needs to be spirituality. Well, we know it isn't going to be what we would consider spirituality. It's going to be, it's going to be mindfulness and humanist. So the Rockefeller Foundation and the Fetzer Institute are all behind this. Why are all these non-governmental organizations involved in our schools? We should all be asking that question. Social emotional learning is a data platform that impersonates mental health services. It psychological evaluations by unqualified guidance counselors and teachers. We are putting teachers in positions they should not be in. And we actually passed a bill at the Capitol this past session that now we call our career and guidance counselors professional counselors. They are not qualified for that, but they have now gone up a level. And I think that has a lot to do with the mental health bill that we passed also, HB 1013. It's problematic for privacy issues. It certainly takes away parental rights. It destabilizes our children's emotions. It promotes activism and division. SEL also helps our children find a voice. And that voice is not necessarily what we want it to be. We have, of course, if you reflect back on that slide where they were recruiting children to go back into their schools, everything is about activism. When we speak or at school board meetings, when parents are up speaking, there are students speaking against the parents. We have moved away from parental rights into the rights of the child. This is an abusive program. It's a worldview. It changes the children's beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes, and it aligns with a Marxist agenda. And these websites update, and it prevents the parent and even the regulatory oversight. And it's funded by non-governmental organizations, the Zuckerbergs, the Gates Foundation, the Buffett family, it goes on and on. Fetzer, Wallace, Rockefellers, there are hundreds that have their fingers in our schools. So let's talk about mental health for all. Georgia Aware is aligned with the Georgia DOE. So we have through our HB 1013, our new mental health bill, it is now part of that bill to do mental health screenings on infants, starting at infants all the way up. I believe this is my opinion, we're starting with infants because part of this bill is bringing in more social workers and more mental health workers. I believe they're going to assign a social worker to every new family to follow them. So we're going in again to universal mental health screenings. So I received this from a dad in another county. His school board member sent it to him. This was one of the tests, a universal screener they were going to use. And actually the teacher used this. She did not even talk with the student. You're going to be shocked to see what she had to rate her students on. This is it. Do they steal? Do they lie? Do they cheat? Do they sneak? Do they have behavior problems, peer problems, low academics, negative attitude, emotionally flat? There's not one positive thing on there. This would make anyone think that any child has mental health issues. I was at the Capitol about 2 weeks before session started, and there were 5 mental health organizations there having a press conference. I could hear the answers to our children's surveys coming out of that press conference. So our data is being given to other organizations. They needed this data to be able to go to the Capitol to get the funds they wanted and to get this bill passed, the mental health bill. This is the multi-level prevention system. This used to be 4 tiers. It's now 3. And Randy can correct me, but what I have been educated on is that the lower level is 80% of the students that usually do not need help. If they do, they've moved up to the 2nd level, and then the ones that are in most need go up to the top level and they figure out a plan for them. But if you noticed what's changed even on the lower level, is students receive services at all levels, depending on the need. So there's some type of evaluating going on at every level. So why is that? My question is, are we establishing a baseline for all our students of mental health, or what could possibly be? I know that there is a drive to have an IEP on every student. So Project Aware, I just really put this up to show you that this is something all again, what do internalizing behaviors look like? And so it goes through this whole list of things and who we're associated with, and CASEL's a part of that. So what has happened now is we have passed HB 1013, the mental health bill. We've $130 million for school-based health clinics. We have had some school-based health clinics in some of the rural counties, but we've never had the mental health bill to go along with it. So this is going to change it tremendously. So the mental health bill is going to staff these clinics with mental health workers, more social workers. Eventually, depending on what the school is looking for, it can be a psychiatrist, a psychology, primary care, diagnostic, lab testing, everything the child needs. So we are creating a hub within our school where your child will have everything they need. So think about this. We are becoming very socialist. We not only provide meals for our children, clothing for our children, testing for our children, we're now turning over their complete health to the government. So parents are going to think this is wonderful, but they don't understand that they're losing all their rights. This mental health bill, if what I have uncovered, and I believe is correct for the Health and Human Services, is that when a child is 13 in Georgia, they can get outpatient help for both drug addiction and mental health, not inpatient, but outpatient. So now we also did not realize there was a lawsuit going on during this whole thing with the mental health bill. Basically, our governor and the AG just settled a case where Medicaid will now pay for transgender surgery. Well, I will tell you that there have been a couple of cases across the US, and probably some we have not heard of, where parents didn't agree to the surgeries. The school or the DFACs took the kids away, put them on Medicaid, and they paid for the surgery. So if a child at 13 can get mental health help for outpatient, and we have these clinics in our schools, how do we know that they're not going to be sending our children out for puberty blocking drugs, for hormones? And at some point, if they want to have their breast cut off at 15, 16, that they won't take the child away and put them on Medicaid and have this done. This is a very complicated bill. It has a lot of open back doors. It has a lot of red flag laws, but what it really bothers me the most is what's going to happen to our children. And again, I had 2 doctors look at this, and they both said this is not a mental health bill. This is pushing the family out. If there was truly, and we know there is a mental health crisis, why did we not focus on just that sector of the state instead of including everyone? I just wanted to show you this, that even though we're fighting critical race theory and diversity, equity, inclusion in the schools, I'm not sure why. Because every one of these mental health organizations have it all over their website. We are fighting a losing battle. This again is called wraparound services. It's the whole child, whole community. This is all over the Georgia Department of Education's website. You can actually find it in China. It's a global agenda, but this is a slide from a little mock-up they have of what a clinic would look like within a school. This is the whole child, whole community model. If you see the graph in the top left, your child is in the middle, and it goes out from your child from feeling safe, healthy, engaged, and self-aware into other organizations, basically, that will be surrounding them. There's actually a committee that was established of organizations that will meet and decide on things having to do with mental health and the schools and students in Georgia. So then it moves out into the community. So the whole child, whole community is based on equity. And the goal is to ensure that every child is challenged, healthy, engaged, supported, safe, as defined and provided and assessed by the federal, state, and local government, not by the parents. This is a graph that shows just a little bit of how all this works together. This goes back to Marxism. The goal of Marxism was the abolition of Western culture. That was the goal, the ruthless destruction of everything existing in our culture. In fact, a major tenet of the Frankfurt School philosophy was the sinister belief that unrestrained sex would be useful and devastating, and a devastating instrument if prompt to run rampant. And we're seeing that in our schools and our society. They promoted compulsory promiscuity, one-parent households, premarital sex, and homosexuality because they knew it would strike at the heart of the family and childbearing as mainstays for Western society. This is where we are. And these are just a few of the organizations and the ideologies that are behind this. Again, there's hundreds. So why are we doing this? Why are we changing our children's beliefs, behaviors, attitudes? Why are we moving away from academics into behavioral? What I believe, and if any of you all are familiar with Agenda 21, is what we're doing with all these surveys is we're actually measuring our children. We are measuring them, we are taking information, and we're going to be tracking them. And we're managing them. We're managing them through social emotional learning. We're managing their behaviors, their attitudes, their values, the algorithms on the computer. If you have a class or a child that's not quite going where you want them to go with all of this, they'll go in and they'll change the algorithms. And they're manipulating our children for human capital, for a workforce, a global workforce. So Agenda 21 is all about a way to grow the economy without using up limited resources. So how do you do that? You buy and you sell people. And that's where we're headed, guys. Our schools are dealing in human capital. And if you'll start noticing articles, websites, over time, you're beginning to see the word human instead of male and female. Our children are going to be wards of the corporations and the government. Every child that's on a computer, that information is going to be used to track them and to create, again, a social credit score. And they're really going to be set to meet the industry, the needs of the industry. You don't need a lot of smart children. You need a labor force you can control. And that's where we're headed. If you go on to CASEL's website, I would encourage all of you to do that. It's casel.org. And we're educating future-ready students for the workforce. Developing social and emotional skills within equitable learning environments is particularly important now as we work to identify and evaluate strong policies to address the equities in youth employment and engage in economic revival. This is just some different things that I put in: educating future-ready students, CASEL. The American Rescue Plan just put in $123 billion they've infused into K through 12 education. Again, why would all these non-governmental organizations be involved in our schools if they weren't going to get a return? And what is the developmental framework for this work? And this is on Castle's website. You can go look. But it's basically, again, going through how we're manipulating our children. This is a book that I ordered. It's very thick. This is called Transforming the Workforce for Children Birth through 8. If you look at the graph on the side, you can't see it very well, but that center circle is the child. I have a friend in Ohio that is a state school board member, and we share information. Everything they're doing, we're doing, and of course, globally, but especially in the US. I have a friend in Texas. We do the same thing. They have a school now for 3 and up. This is about bringing in all our children, cradle to grave. So the enemy likes to hide wolves inside sheep's clothing, but that's okay. God hides lions inside of lambs. What are you, a lion or a lamb? And where is God calling you to get involved to protect the innocent? We can't sit on the sideline anymore, guys. Not only are we going to lose our children, we're going to lose our culture. There is something also in our schools called restorative justice. I would love for you to buy and read the book, Why Meadow Died. Meadow died in the Parkland, Florida shooting, and her dad and Max Eden wrote this book. They didn't blame the shooter, they blamed the system. Obama had guidelines in place to stop the school to jail pipeline. And so instead of turning children in or having behavior consequences, we're putting them in social emotional learning circles. Guys, I believe, and this is just my opinion, we are creating the school shooters. If you go and you read that book, you'll understand why. I have a friend that quit teaching because he said that half of his students were rowdy. He put them out in the hallway. Someone came by and said, you can't do that. So he said, then I'm going to send them to the library. And he said, no, they have to go back into your classroom and you have to deal with it. So unless you are being physically abused by a student, you cannot reprimand them. You cannot hold them accountable because their rights are more important than your rights. But quite honestly, I believe, again, it's social and emotional learning. We're causing chaos in our schools. It's lawlessness. Our kids need boundaries. God created us that way. We function better that way. But yet everything is the opposite of what it should be. And because of that, we're losing an entire generation of children. And in the end, we're going to lose our country. So as much as we don't want to get involved, there has to be a way for all of us to get involved. So that is what I had to offer today. I would love to answer questions if you have any. Let me unstop sharing. There we go.
Yes, thank you very much, Rhonda. Very informative. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. I had 2 or 3 questions I wanted to ask you, and then we'll open it up for others to join in. At the outset, you at least alluded to the pharmaceutical industry and these psychotropic drugs that are so common today. Now, if you all watch the Tucker Carlson show on Fox News occasionally, this past Monday, in his monologue, he talked about the incredible corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. It was absolutely one of the best monologues I've ever heard over the years. So I would highly encourage you to go to Fox News, look up the Tucker Carlson show for this past Monday and listen to that monologue that he delivered. Very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, Rhonda, that most students probably don't take real seriously what they learn in school academically. But they're very much influenced by the social and emotional environment in school. Now, the enemy is very, very clever. We know that. And they have exploited this brilliantly. Can you comment on that fact that, yes, I understand what's being taught in history classes, political science classes, sociology, psychology, so on, oftentimes is thinly veiled propaganda. But I think far more insidious is the, again, the social and emotional environment in our schools. Would you mind just responding to that?
I agree, Jeffrey. The social and emotional learning really is the Trojan horse in the schools. We will not get rid of any of this unless we get rid of social emotional learning. But quite honestly, it is so ingrained and so funded. And not only that, we're beginning to see it in our everyday lives. This isn't just now in K through 12. And of course, we know it's been in college. But as Dr. Jones said, this is what caused him to come out, because he sees the dangers with, he actually said, people should pull their children from school because SEL is that dangerous. So it's being used to change our country. It's being used to dehumanize our children. We actually, it is all about finding an identity. Has anyone heard of furries in the schools? We have children that identify as animals, and we can think that's funny, but I have a friend that teaches nursing, and they had a college student apply for nursing, and they had to turn her down because her one accommodation was an adult-sized litter box. Again, instead of when they're in these younger grades, getting help for them or helping them to understand this is not natural, we're encouraging it. Our director in Bryan County was sharing this with a father, and during that conversation, the daughter jumped up in the background and said, "Don't make fun of furries. My brother's one. Some are sexual and some are not." I interviewed 2 7th grade students in Forsyth County, and they started out being kind of silly. And in the end, it was really sad because they were telling me about the furries in their school, how they're not disciplined, they're loud, they can wear masks and ears and tails and all this stuff. They can't even wear a hat, and they get in trouble for talking. So again, we're causing, I believe, the mental health issues in the schools. So these furries, if you understand comprehensive sex ed, we believe they're also grooming them for bestiality. There's bestiality books they can get a hold of through their filtered database in EBSCO. And yet we also see adults that they have bestiality conferences. And again, look back at that child that said some are sexual, some are not. So we're creating so many issues with our children, and believe me, they are not learning academics. We know there will be a few that make it through this, but I believe the majority of children cannot live through this every day. And the other thing is with SEL, if you have a kindergartner and you're using this with them and you're instilling all of this, they don't know to go home and tell their parents. To them, this is normal, right? So I had a 6th grade parent talking to a friend, and her daughter turned around and said, "My teacher must be right. You must be racist." Did that child think to tell the parent that? No, because this is normalized with them. They think all of this is normal. So Hitler used this in World War II. And so I believe we're creating brown shirts too, quite honestly. So this is nothing but Marxism on steroids, and it's mostly happening, I think, even more in the US because of our freedoms and the way our country, our system works. So they've really got to come after us harder than they have anyone else. And my friend Lily Tang Williams, She is traveling the country speaking because she grew up under Mao, and she is very, very concerned because everything that's happening in the schools is exactly what happened to them. They're only using race instead of class. So we have to do something. The SEL, think about those school clinics. Going back to what you said, Jeffrey. Part of FERPA now says that they can send your child's information out to a mental health worker. Okay, so if in fact they don't have to tell us anything at a certain age, drugs are going to be a big part of this. And I think that's another reason we're taking our counselors up to professional counselors, and the other things we're putting in place, because we're going to have telehealth. So are they going to all end up on medications? I mean, there are so many things in front of our kids. And I do believe those psychotropic drugs, along with the manipulation of what they're going through, is causing a lot of this. There's consequences for what's happening to our children. And I really want to encourage parents that they need to stand up and do something. They're fearful, but believe me, I have more parents telling me around middle school, and they have no idea that their child has now decided they're a boy instead of a girl. There's SEL is also about separating the child from the family, because if your family has control over you, they can't have control over you. So we're seeing that happen every day. So this is a very serious issue.
A couple of other just quick questions, and then we'll open things up. I remember, is there a curriculum for churches that exposes and deals with many of the issues you were discussing this evening? And if so, maybe you could send that to me via email, and we'll send it out to our entire contact list. But if you wouldn't mind just mentioning if there is such a curriculum. And I remember going to hear Josh McDowell, one of the popularizers of Christian apologetics over the last 50, 60 years. I went and heard Josh a few years ago, and a question came up in the Q&A about, and I don't remember the context exactly, but he said that in their family gatherings with children and grandchildren, the primary topic of conversation, what they constantly come back to, and this is somebody, again, who's a Christian apologist, a well-regarded Christian apologist, the topic that they focus on the most whenever their family gets together is sex. That is the cutting edge today. And but anyway, as far as a curriculum for churches, anything you would recommend necessarily?
Actually, I don't know of one. If anyone does run across one, I would love it. What I'm seeing more of is it coming into our churches. There's actually a wheel you can buy that is emotional feelings, and they connect a verse to it. So I had this discussion with this group on how it causes you to focus more on your feelings. Well, that's what SEL does, guys. We're developing victims because everything is about them, and they keep them in it. So we're developing victimhood and narcissist. And we have mindfulness in our schools. There are schools that have rooms our children can go and meditate. One parent was complaining because the child was given a rock to hold. Mindfulness is emptying yourself of everything. So what are they putting back in our children? That's what I want to know. So we actually have individuals hired to work with. Now, remember, every school is different, but overall, every school is the same because this is in every school, maybe to differing degrees at the moment, but it will be there eventually. So I don't know of anything, but what I'm seeing is more and more of it being in the church. I'm not going to say which church, but my son's church. I just saw their list of activity or discipleship and different things. They have a counselor on staff, a psychologist on staff, and it's a class on anxiety, a class. I mean, it's just, again, it's emotional things. And so and gosh, guys, every time I ask someone if they're doing a Bible study, they say yes, but it's not the Bible. It's man's word. It's some book someone's written. So we've gotten, and that's not all bad, but when you're doing that all the time, we've also taken our Bible studies and we're bringing in all of this. So my son's last book was written by a psychologist. So we have to be careful.
And I know, Janet, you have a question, and Bob Harsh has a question. Why don't we take Janet's first and then Bob's, and then I know Randy wants to enter into the conversation, but Janet, please unmute, and you'll need to unmute. You're still muted, Janet. Probably down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it said the host had to let me unmute. So someone just let me. I don't know why it was not allowing me to unmute.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
Rhonda. I'm glad I got on here because I'm in my third career, and the Lord has led me to be a high school teacher, which I have been doing. And yes, SEL was brought in a lot, especially through the pandemic time at my high school. Luckily, I'm not seeing it in a sinister way, but wow, this is very eye-opening for me. Do you have a resource to recommend for a high school teacher, or is there through your organization, Truth in Education, are there teachers who are, like members or in a group to help support and talk about issues?
Actually, Janet, we have a couple of teachers, yes. And we have tried, teachers speak out anonymously, but not to the degree that I wish they would, because I understand why they do get reprimanded. And so they are scared for their jobs. But we also saw a lot of teachers leaving schools this time. I mean, we had a lot of teachers leaving. And so I'm hoping through that. We've even talked about, we're willing to do an NDA just to get teachers to share with us anonymously. But I do have a couple of teachers. In fact, someone that works with Ty is actually very tied into the school system. So she's part of that. And we would love to have more teachers. Number one, not to just get information from, but to support them, because we have a lot of teachers that are stuck there. Many are leaving. Guys, I sat in on a 2-day symposium for Christian schools that was headmasters from all over the country. They all took this in. Mount Perrin is where it was hosted. So Mount Perrin Fellowship has it. Whitfield was there. I'm not sure how much they took in, but Whitfield was there. Lovett, Westminster. But a lot of our Christian schools, you can hardly find a school that doesn't have it unless you go to a small Christian school or you choose to homeschool. So a lot of people are choosing to homeschool. And so I want to encourage you guys that as session starts, there are a lot of school choice bills being written, and they are including homeschool in those school choice bills. That's what's happened to a lot of our private schools. They've taken government money. That is going to leave the door open for them to come in eventually and tell our homeschoolers what they have to teach. We have to protect our last freedom way of protecting our kids. So please learn more about that, and please come against that. We need to keep homeschooling out of our school choice bills.
Well, Rhonda,
Thank
I
you.
did want to mention, I was out Saturday night on the Marietta Square with some friends for dinner, and we were walking around. There had to be a young group of at least 20 people, and some of them were dressed as those furries with their tail and their ears. And I knew it when I saw it, and just as normal as, just out in public thinking it's very, very normal. The other thing though is we had our big district meeting where we heard from our superintendent. I have to say, I'm blessed right now. I do have a superintendent that really wants his teachers to be about academics.
Good.
He actually says he's going to take the hit so that we don't get distracted with all the noise and the culture that's happening. He wants us to focus on the academics and teaching. And I can say at my high school, that is the push, that is the heart of what we're doing. But I also see some of the other stuff going on too, because we are a very large high school.
Okay.
And I'm seeing, well, we have some counselors who are gay, and therefore a lot of people they counsel. Also, I'll have them as ninth graders, and by 11th grade, they think they are gay too, you know? So
Okay.
Yeah.
it's
Well,
happening. And girls walking hand in hand in the hallways like I've never seen before. But we are still allowed to enforce discipline. Thank God. We have admins who will back us up. But I'm seeing a lot of social changes with the teenagers, especially the girls.
well, it's absolutely pervasive. And as Rhonda said, you find this in many Christian schools as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Bob, you,
stories about one that begins with an L, but that I hear some things that go on there that wouldn't even go on at my high school. So
yes, Lovett and Westminster no longer qualify, and they haven't, frankly, for decades as Christian schools.
No.
Bob, you
Yes, I have two lines of questions, and I want to thank you for your disturbing my evening. I have been so frustrated through this, and you have done a good job.
Good.
Yeah.
I hope so.
But my questions are like, okay, I live in Gwinnett County,
Oh.
and Collins Hill is the high school here. I
Mhm.
don't even have any idea how I don't have kids in the school district. I don't know how a parent would go about and say, you know, you go to the superintendent, you go to the principal, what kind of things are being taught, and are they going to give you a straight answer, or are they going to appease you and hope you go out the door?
So Bob, I have a director in Gwinnett County. I have a couple of people working in Gwinnett that I can introduce you to. But we have
Okay.
to remember most everything is online. It's very, very hard. Even though we passed a parental rights bill that gives us the right to review primary curriculum, if you think about it, we don't have a lot of primary curriculum. And what they didn't put in that bill is that we can have transparency with supplemental material. All of this is coming through supplemental material. So you're not going to see anything. One of the biggest things we do is open records request, where we file an open records. They have to respond to you within 3 days, and then within a certain amount of time to answer your questions about what curriculum we were very specific about what goes into that open records request. But I can tell you, Gwinnett County, unfortunately, this is the other thing. None of our school boards turned over. Look what has happened in our country, and not one of our school boards turned over. Gwinnett is as radical now as it can be. So they are going to have everything. They'll have comprehensive sex ed. It's going to be the full gamut of it all, because I don't know if you've seen videos of Therese Johnson, one of your board members, but you would be blown away. So it's very radical. But that's what we do. We just do open records request. We do go to board meetings. But the biggest thing too is we've got to educate parents. Most parents still don't know. We watch the television, we watch certain stations, but I speak all the time, and most people still have no clue. They have a feeling something's not right, but they can't connect the dots and they don't understand it all. So education is key, and getting into a church is impossible. Church of the Apostles has been a super support for us. We spoke to 200 people at Church of the Apostles. Then and when we speak, we give an overview, and then we have 4-hour trainings. And then it kind of filtered through the different parts of the church, which has been wonderful. Dr. Youssef's very supportive, but we haven't found any other churches that will really let us come in and speak. So I think this is about changing hearts. I think that we have got to find a way to educate people. And I truly will tell you that our goal now is, now that we've seen no school boards really have turned over, nothing has changed. The bills at the Capitol were watered down. We got no support through legislation. We need to educate people, and we need to encourage parents to pull their children from the schools, but we still need to stay there and fight because there are kids that cannot leave. But I really believe at this point that even if the schools change, it's going to be a couple of generations. But it is important. We still have children there who could never leave those schools.
My other question has to do with this idea of the perception of the kids when a parent. Let me just back up. I have grandkids in Pennsylvania, in elementary and high school, and so what I would ask them is to see if they thought they were being taught critical theory in any of their classes. And so I had to explain what I meant by critical theory. And my feeling was, I don't think they would know if they were. I don't think it's a matter of like trust. Like, I'm not going to tell mom about this or grandpa about that. I think they just don't know because they're in the mix of it. So
They're being indoctrinated.
So and you may have this resource, but a challenge I'd have for Truth in Education is make up some sort of a booklet or something of here's an effective way to ask your children what they're being taught in school. And that's going to be a hard thing, I think. Probably a psychologist has to help write it up, but
well,
that's needed.
I did encourage Dr. Jones, and I did. I sent him a text. I said, God gave me something for you to do. You need to write a book on SEL. And he really started coming out because he works with adolescents. And he said the school counselors are not qualified. He's seeing the dangers that are happening to his patients through them. So I encourage people, do not let your children go to a school counselor for anything other than career and college. You can opt out of this stuff, and we have opt-out forms. But yes, they're becoming everything to the child, and none of it are they doing well. That's the scary part.
Now
thanks, Bob.
Okay.
We better move on here. Millie, I believe you have a comment or question, and let's see. Paul, can we unmute Millie there? Set her free. Liberate Millie.
Hi, Millie.
Hi, Rhonda. Thank you so much for what you do. Oh, goodness, it's overwhelming just listening to it. But what are some concrete things that we can do as concerned, grandparents, just citizens, not only for our children or families, but for these others who can't speak? What would some concrete, I know probably voting, but some other things that you have when you said we need to wake up?
Yes. Well, voting is one of them, but it hasn't worked for us recently. It didn't help us with school boards, but yes, we always vote. That's very important. But we need people that will help us do research. Like, I know that school choice is coming up. I have a lot of data on school choice. People don't understand that school choice is actually the end all be all with charter schools. We are set up as regions, which is not American, is communist. And the purpose for charter and school choice is really we're going to end up losing local control. It'll all be regional. So I want to we have research that needs to be done. We need people who can write short articles that we can send out. We have events that we need to set up and people to offer to speak if we train you. Those are the biggest things really, is we need more people educated that can go out and speak. Because the more we offer this information, the more parents are going to know about it. So whatever your gift is or you're comfortable doing, we will find something for everyone to be a part of it.
Thank you. And of course, your website has a wealth of information available. So I encourage everybody to go there. Now, we don't have too much longer. I know Mary has a question, and I want to give some quality time to Randy Huff, who serves on the school board down in Fayette County. But first of all, Mary, if you will, and then we'll move on to Randy here.
Yeah. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, Mary.
I want to meet you sometime in person. When you were pushing against that 1013 bill, I gave out as many flyers as I could to possibly talk about that. One of the most interesting things is some of the people I connected with during that time, they're not even necessarily strong Christians, and they're already pulling their kids into homeschooling because they see the threat.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting, that it's not even a true, this is just like survival to keep your kids healthy. One of the books that I found, because I've been trying to research this on my own, like when did some of this start? I have a book called The Myth of Mental Health, Foundations of a Theory of Personal Conduct by Thomas Zalsa, SZASZ, He was writing articles in the 50s, and he wrote this book in the 70s. And one of the problems that he pointed out is once you have the state as your main guiding post, that is when you're going to have, you know how we talk about in Christian history, theocracy. He says this is when you're going to have pharmacracy, which is the alliance of medicine with the state.
And that's what we have. Yes.
And also, you have the power. He did this great comparison of how regular health is more like a gold standard where you have to have a diagnosis and symptoms. But the problem with mental health, it's more like a fiat. It's almost fake because you're looking for a diagnosis. Instead, you can't, it says new diseases can't be invented, so they have to be discovered. And this is exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about doing this checklist of everything that's negative. You're forcing labels.
And that's important, Mary. Labeling is part of this. Everyone is going to have a label. That is huge in this. And I'll tell you what, you said something that made me, the original mental health bill, HB 1013, we had the World Health Organization in it. And we had the American Psychological Association's diagnostic codes. Dr. Jones says, though, has never been used for anything legal. It was just research, but those would have become our law. And they're changing again this month. And every time they changed, it would be our law. Guess what falls under that? My son has ADD, but that's considered mental health. Mental health and mental illness are two different things. Mental health is behavior, and the parent should be in charge of that. That is very different than mental illness. So I'll tell you what, the sheriffs are tickled pink to have all these peace officers and everything that's coming along with this, but you're going to start noticing, and it's already happened, where school resource officers are being replaced with peace officers. So this was always the intention, to get rid of our school resource officers. We're bringing in peace officers, and it's just, the entire thing is nefarious in what they're doing. And you just start looking at all the pieces, and it's just one big puzzle finally coming together where they're going to control our mental health. Those are the two things all of us did get out of the bill, was the World Health Organization and APA, but they're coming into it through the back door, just like that transgender surgery now will be covered by Medicaid. So it's all going to happen.
And now you
Well,
have.
thank you. And then we better, Mary, I'm sorry, we better move on here. We have Karen Burgess wanted to ask a quick question, and then Randy is going to sort of take it from there and close us out with some interchanges with you, Rhonda.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, for time's sake, we need to move on here. Karen?
Hi, sorry. Yes, just a quick question. You had touched on something about homeschooling. I always worry in the back of my mind that at some point they're going to not allow homeschooling anymore. Do you see that as a threat in the future?
I do. That's kind of what I touched on earlier with these school choice bills. They're making it look beautiful, just like Satan does. He makes everything look beautiful until he gets you, and then you can't get out of it. In fact, one of the groups pushing it said, well, they can opt in. And I said, yes, until they can't opt out. There is a web being, it's just not good. We've got to protect homeschooling. So yes, there is a drive to have all our children. If you look at that book I showed you, 0 to 8, number one, they're losing a lot of money with kids that are pulling out in homeschooling. And virtual schooling is huge. And actually, I think that's going to increase for public school. But I will tell you this, and I can send it to Jeffrey and he can circulate it. My friend in Ohio, that's the state board member, is a researcher. And she has found through one of the programs that even if you homeschool, if you are homeschooling online, they are collecting all your data. Homeschoolers need to go back to books. That really is our whole issue. We should all be using books, just like we should be using paper ballots, right? So that is the key, is if you homeschool, you need to use books, because even online homeschooling, they're collecting data.
And I believe there are countries, it seems to me that a few years ago, I heard about a case in Germany. There are
Yes.
countries that have outlawed homeschooling. And I believe Germany is one of those. Well, Randy, I wanted to give you a few minutes to interact with Rhonda and for the benefit of the rest of us. So we'll probably need to close things out here in about 10 minutes, but please go ahead, Randy.
Gonna put me on the spot with Randy. Let's go, Randy.
And Randy needs to be, yes.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Randy.
Okay. Gosh, I'm so exhausted. I can't think of anything to say. Good night. So here, I mean, I could talk about this for a week and go into everything you said. I couldn't agree more with it. I've learned a lot. Thank you for the presentation. You now have become a new mark on my list of people to contact when I'm desperate, and it becomes. I mean, to narrow it down. Let me just talk about structure for a minute, in terms of what's supposed to be happening in the Georgia school system, in a kind of short story.
Okay.
First of all, there's a hierarchy, like most places, and the top of it is a legislature. And then underneath that are different departments that run the government. The one we're interested in most is the Department of Education. And there's also another office, independently elected, who is the superintendent, the state superintendent of education. And they all play roles, but they're supposed to be playing on a different tune in a united orchestra, if you will, and all trying to play the same music, if you will, the same message. So what is that message? Well, when I learned, one of the first things I learned when I came on the board was we teach to state standards. Okay, oh boy, that sounds, we got structure right there. How can you be in compliance with state standards when you're teaching BLM stuff? Well, here's the problem. Anytime you have a rule, there has to be an enforcer. And if there's no enforcer behind the rule, then people, like children, are going to go back and they're going to get more creative. And because they're the risk, just like we see now, if we're not going to take kids off the street, young people off the street, or any kind of criminal activity off the street, or if we do it and turn around and release them right away, they come back and do more. And so again, I think Jeffrey mentioned it. I am on the board now for 18 months in Fayette County. Our principal, thank God, was raised and schooled in Gwinnett County. He has a Christian background. When he first came to our district in August of 2020, so he's coming up on the end of his first 2 years. And when I was on the board, then a few months later, 6 or 7 months later, and we went to dinner, I said, "What is your attitude towards CRT?" And he goes, "CRT will not be in this district." All right. I said, "Great." The problem is we've got 20,000 students and 3,500 staff people and teachers spread across 24 schools. There's just going to be infringements. And the way to discipline these teachers, if the principals, now the principals issue the discipline, right? So you got, to continue my hierarchy, you've got the legislature, the state board of education, the Department of Education, even the governor of the state, and then you come on down to the boards of education, and the superintendent reports to the board. And we basically are charged with making policy. Okay, that's our main goal. We make policy, we write policy. And then the superintendent executes our policies or executes academics and teaching and running the school system according to our policies. And then the principals have to relay and enforce or teach the teachers in his school and his or her school, and hold them accountable for teaching to state standards. Okay, so okay, 4 minutes. See, thank you. That was Jeffrey. So here's the problem. I asked the question, what happens when a district is out of compliance with teaching and state standards? And I asked this to a senior guy on the board, has been in the teaching system in Fayette County for 40 years. And he goes, I said, could you tell me of one case where any particular district was held to account and punished or forced to comply in your history here? And he thought for a minute, he said, no, I don't know of any. So that's the problem we have. You can show me, I've got right before me every law you've talked about. Here they are right here. I've been studying because we are now in the process of turning these laws into policies.
Yes.
And I'm not going to go into what I've already run into in that process, but I would love to talk to you about it, Rhonda.
I would love to talk to you, Randy. And
yeah, we're running into some really weird stuff.
I would love to talk to you. And the Georgia School Board Association is an issue because most boards don't control their superintendent. The superintendent controls the board. And the superintendent is most of the time found by a recommendation from the Georgia School Board Association, which means that superintendent is going to be working their legislative agenda.
Yeah.
And the school board is silent.
Yeah,
So,
well, see, that's what a rubber stamp board. Well, it wasn't rubber stamp before, and I'm happy to say the guy that replaced that I replaced was the guy who wasn't a rubber stamp. So they got a non-rubber stamper when I replaced him, because I'm the one asking questions. Why do we do it this way? I voted against a $500 incentive bonus to all teachers, $1.2 million. As an incentive, I said it was a bribe to get their COVID shots. And,
yes. And you know what, Randy? The teachers just got a raise. Well, guess what? In Forsyth County, they were told not to put their wish list up for the items they knew for class because they just got a raise.
Yeah.
Can you believe that, guys?
Yeah, no. Well, okay. Yeah. So there's a lot going on. And I have to, here's what, you don't have to remember this, but I do. I can cry tears for every district in the state, but I was elected by Fayette County District, and that's my first and foremost obligation.
Right.
So while I have the knowledge to sit and do things with the legislature and everything else, and go to meetings with you like we do, which I'd like to do again sometime, I've got to get allies down here, because my colleagues on the board they think I'm a kind of, they don't say this, no one ever said it to me, they think I'm a conspiracy theorist.
So,
and which is the left's answer. Oh, you don't really believe that, Randy. Yes, I do believe it, and here's why.
Well,
They don't.
Millie knows I'm a conspiracy theorist. She's known me for 30 years.
Okay.
But let me tell you, I sat in on the Georgia health standards. When people say they teach to the standards, to me, that doesn't mean anything because that's a framework. It's what's brought in to teach to the standards that's the issue. Most of the time, that's an escape answer. People don't understand that, not you, but I've been in a lot of places speaking, and if a board member's there, a state's board member, oh, we teach to the standards. Well, most people don't understand. I mean, the health standards, they're always sent out for stuff, not to their family. In fact, they're sent to a trusted advisor. Not their parent, but a trusted advisor. That can be anything.
Yeah.
So I believe that, one of the worst things we ever did was to not elect our Georgia school board members. They're appointed.
Yeah.
And that was a really big thing that hurt Georgia, I believe. But
Now, part of my problem in this translation of the law into policy verbiage is what the role of the state board of education is, because they put out a model, the GSBA put out a model, the Board of Education people put out a model before the GSBA, and we went with the GSBA.
of
And the
course,
GSBA left out of the model requirement in the law, number 3. All right. And I'm fighting that right now. If you can read I'm talking about in 1084
okay.
in the critical divisive concepts. Okay.
Yes.
So that we can talk about that later.
Yeah,
But and nobody can answer me. Well, how could you not go with the model from the State Board of Education? All right. So in signing off before Jeffrey has a heart attack, where's my camera? Oh, okay. You mentioned Michael Youssef. Here's
Yes.
his book. If you want something good to read, you can read this. It's called Hope for This Present Crisis, a 7-step path to restoring the world gone mad. And we have gone mad. And then another excellent author that's among us tonight is Jeffrey Brashears himself, who's
Yes.
put out a 18 or 20 page, I don't remember, it helped me, Jeffrey, book on understanding critical race theory. And
30 pages.
30 pages. I was involved in that a little bit. So there's
Yeah,
30
we've,
pages, and they're only $5 a piece from Jeffrey. You can order them on Areopagus website. There it is right there. All right. So
Yeah, we've been able to sell thousands of those, and
I bought
hopefully-
500 and I'm selling them to people at
Wow.
meetings.
yeah.
I put my email in the chat if anyone wants it.
Okay.
Okay.
So Jeffrey,
And I would love to talk to you.
thank you again, Rhonda. Thank you for so much time, Jeffrey. I could say so much more, but I tried to give the framework, and that's it. I'll let it go with that.
Well, we ought to schedule a time for you and I and Rhonda and others to get together and continue processing some of this. Thank you very much, Rhonda. That was extremely informative.
You are welcome.
And of course, this is all recorded. So those of you who have logged in this evening, be sure you spread the word and encourage everybody you know to listen to this podcast. Also, I just wanted to remind everybody of the Tucker Carlson monologue from his Monday evening telecast a couple of days ago, in which he talked about the enormous damage being done and corruption in the pharmaceutical industry in America.
Jeffrey, I watched that 3 times already.
And by the way, I'm trying to find the script for that so that we can send that out to hundreds of people. I don't know if they translate his monologues into script or not, but I'll try to find that out and send it out to everyone possible.
It was great.
Yes, it was one of the best I've ever heard. Well, thank you again. Continued blessings on your efforts, Rhonda, and Randy, you as well. And your very strategic situation there in Fayette County. So you both need to be in all of our prayers. Thanks for all that you do. And thanks to all of you who joined us this evening. And again, help us spread the word. We need far more people to listen to this podcast this evening. So help us get the word out.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, blessings on the rest of your week, and may you have a